Hello, welcome to the September 6th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will go ahead and begin. Bear with me just for a moment. Hello, welcome to the September. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Greg Undo. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America as focusing primarily on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host for the live stream today. I'm presenting from Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area. If you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. How a live stream works, if you have not attended one before, is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or simply ask and type the question in the chat field. When asking questions in the chat field, if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could refrain from asking the same questions over and over again, that would be helpful. So if you just enter your question in once, that would be great. And if we could refrain from repeating questions, that would just speed up the whole process so we get more questions answered. When asking your question, if we could specify which level of Cubase you're running, so if it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist Pro, or other Steinberg programs that you're running. And also if you could specify which version, so if it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system, that would be helpful. We should have all of the topics time-stamped and pinned to the top of the comments field later this evening. But if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, I think we've crossed over 20,000 topics since kind of COVID started. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for his diligence in creating that website. It's a wonderful resource. We have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees, but they just kind of do this to make it a better community. So we want to give special thanks to them. And one other wonderful resource of information to the Steinberg community is the Cubase Nation Discord. And check out, and so if you go to the Cubase Nation Discord, there's a wonderful collection of information that's relevant to Steinberg users. So we want to thank Jazz Dude for all of his work in doing that as well. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we see question. Hey, when I want to undo something in compression or EQ, for example, I select Control Z to undo, but it doesn't undo it. The only thing it does is maybe a color change on a fader channel. So there's kind of a separate editor history for mix consoles. So if I have come over here and I move faders, adjusted panning accordingly, we could just click directly here. This is the undo for the mix console history. So we could do that, or you could hit Alt or Option plus Z, Alt or Option plus Shift plus Z for redo on all of the different functions. So if I have come to this particular audio channel and I have adjusted the EQ, I adjust the compressor, and even if I add a plugin and adjust a parameter in a plugin, so now that I just hit Alt or Option plus Z, like zebra, at this point, all of the functions, so we go back our value, get rid of the plugin, we go get rid of our compression, get rid of adding the compression, get rid of my EQ changes. And so try Alt or Option plus Z to do that. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we see Jets Oder Knee checking in from Austria. Thanks for joining us in the live stream today. So we see from the toaster or toaster. Sorry, the font is small on my computer. Hey there. Is there a regular schedule to this round? So generally what we do with the live stream is just answer questions that people pose to us, and we do this generally every Tuesday and Friday, unless I'm called out for a work commitment or a holiday. But generally you can count on it being here Tuesday and Friday and just ask whatever questions. Okay, so we have a question. Question. When recording MIDI in multiple takes, how can I stack record and not hear the previous MIDI recording while I record the new one, just like when you record audio in multiple takes? So if we do this on like a cycle, let me just come over here to say like all right, so I have a Rhodes patch and and we could do this with cycle recording of MIDI. So if we go to the MIDI record modes here, there is a stacked mode. So this will work kind of just like the audio. So as I record in, all right, and now. So now at that point, we could have each of those where the other ones aren't sounding. And if you wanted to just using the comp tool, just like we do with audio, at that point, we could select different takes from different selections like so. So go to the record mode. And this only works with cycle recording. I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but you could just place it into stacked. So give that a try. If not, you may have to manually mute the event. All right. Okay, so we see, and how can I quickly return to the starting point of recording so I can record another take without having to set a range and loop it, since it is a free improvisation with no clear range. All right, so let's say if I want to go to the beginning of recording, so let's say I have like a MIDI recording here even, so let's say I'll just do a quick. And I'll take it out of cycle. All right, and we'll just do. All right, and we'll do another recording here. So let's say. All right, so if you wanted to immediately go back and let me just, one of the preferences that you could set easily for this is if you go to the transport and you just say use video follows edit mode. So once we select an event, at that point, we could just go directly to the beginning of that particular selection. So if you wanted to go to the beginning of the project quickly, what you could do is hit the period key, and that will take you to the beginning of the project. So if you hit the period key on the numeric keypad, so, right where you have the numbers, that will take you to the beginning. And let's see, I see Jazz Dude mentions if you hit comma, that will also take you to the beginning. But if you wanted to go directly to the beginning of the event, go to transport, and then you could just activate use video follows edit mode. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have Peter checking in from Montreal. All right, we have Patrick Becker joining from Germany. Uno Memento from Finland. We have Stefan from Sweden. Benny from Sweden as well. All right, we see Jan from Stockholm. All right, so we see, hi Greg, thanks for the macros and logical XMLs. Where do I put them so I can use them? So if you go to the logical editor, so let's say we go to like the project logical editor, and this is kind of changed a bit in version 12. But if we wanted to come over here, we could just say, when we go to show user presets location. So at this point, we could see our logical editor presets here. So we could just come directly over here and see the user presets, and you could just copy them directly in there. So you'll have the logical editor and project logical editor. And for the key commands, I think if we just go to, and this will be slightly different on if you're on Mac or PC. So I'll show you. So on the Mac platform and on the PC platform, if you go to the start menu and go click on the start and then go to all programs, go to Steinberg Cubase. And if you just open up the program folder, but don't start the program, you'll see a user settings data folder. In there's where you could copy over the keyboard shortcuts. But if you're on Mac, we could come over to, not sure why I opened the browser. Sorry. We'll go over to our Finder. And if you go to you may have to hold down the Alt key to go to library. And then at that point, you'll see preferences. And as we kind of scroll over, you'll see your Cubase 12 preferences. And then we should see kind of presets. And here you can see key commands. So you could just copy in the key command, right, and place it into the key commands preferences preset. So, but let me know if you still have problems, you could just email me again. All right, so we see David. We see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Thanks for joining us. And David Griffiths checking in from Wales. All right, and we have Nigeria checking in. All right. See Peter just saying thank you to all the wonderful people who make these meetups possible. It's all the people that attend them make it possible as well. So. All right, so we have a question. How can one combine Cubase and an X32 for a live sound mix for an event? So I'm not sure if you have backing tracks playing in Cubase, so generally like a lot of times people would use the X32. That's a digital mixer for those who aren't familiar with it. I believe it's the Behringer X32 digital mixer. So many people would use that solely for kind of live mixing. Like if you wanted to have a, live musicians playing, sometimes people will have Cubase playing back tracks or recording like backing tracks and virtual instruments. So you could have that and the audio routed out through the X32, or you could record from the X32 a multi-track directly into Cubase. But a lot of times if you have an X32, people would be using that for the mix. But let me know if there's like specific setup that you want to accomplish with that. So you see David Griffith saying mix console specific undo. Didn't know that. How brilliant, man. So I think that came in like 9.5 or 10, something like that. All right, we see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin, Gerald Ely from Martinez, California, Soren from Sweden. All right, so we see maybe a follow-up on the X32. It says Cubase version 10. My question is, how can you combine Cubase and X32 to run a live event using the plugins from Cubase and also using the instrument tones from the Midi? So, really all you have to do is, if your Cubase setup is, you could just have that going directly into the X32. If you wanted to, you could use that as your audio interface or use an audio interface. And MIDI interface. I'm not sure if the X32 has a MIDI on it. I know it will work as an USB audio interface, but you could just simply use that as well and just play back. So generally, it's not going to be, the X32 is not going to be so capable of, saying, okay, I want to use a Cubase plugin, for the reverb on the X32. So you may have to do some patching on your X32 to do that. And I don't really, I haven't worked with an X32, so. All right, so we see a question, importing an old audio tape session into Cubase, obviously not recorded with the benefit of a metronome. How do you change the tempo across all tracks to be in time with a metronome? Okay, so, and we could do this for multi-track. I'll show it on kind of a single project here. The concept will be the same. So if we didn't record with a click track, so let's say if we listen to this particular project, and the click track has nothing to do with what's going on musically. So I could select kind of, if you have a multi-track, maybe like the drums, something that's going to be kind of rhythmically stable, maybe give you some transients. But what I'm going to do is just come over here and just do, from the project menu, tempo detection. So we'll have it analyze. And then we could also do some correction. So say, okay, let's do offbeat correction. So now we figured out that the tempo is fluctuating. But if we wanted all of the tracks to, change, I could select all the tracks or select, in this case, just a single track. And if we go to the audio menu to advanced, we could just say set definition from tempo. So we'll say we could set this in a project, or we could actually, and what this is going to do is to take all of the tempo changes and embed that into the audio files itself. So once we've done that, we could say, as we play, we have our fluctuating tempo. Say we're around 140. So if I wanted to take the tempo map off and just type in a tempo of 142. So now where it was deviating in tempo, it's now playing back a perfect tempo. Or if I want to be 156. Or if I want to be 100, I can just type the tempo in. And now Cubase will know how to act, kind of with a lot of accuracy, be able to take those particular, how to stretch, because we know kind of what the tempo is of every single beat. Once it's been embedded into the project or into the file. So after doing the tempo detection, make sure you select the event or all of the events and choose set definition from tempo. And then it will just follow whatever tempo you have set in the master timeline. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have James Harcourt just checking in from the UK. Says he won't be in too long. He'll catch it on the repeat, on the playback. It says studio time right now, so make sure you take advantage of your studio time. All right, so we see match deepers from a cloudy UJ or even a UK. So sorry, it's cloudy there. We've had rain here in Washington, D.C. area today, this morning. So we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, so we see Jean-Marie Horvat on the live stream. Glad that you could make it. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have a question. Any best practices when preparing to export for a Pro Tools project? So when we're doing that, like as we do an export, you want to make it as hard. What my success in these situations was making it really hard for someone else to screw up, to make any mistakes whatsoever. So one is, give everything a name. So name all the files. If you have multiple takes, maybe you could provide, if you did like 16 different vocal comp takes, maybe provide all of the different takes and provided a take with the comps, that you were intending, because there's nothing worse than getting 400 vocal files and someone else has to kind of figure out what was going on. And I would just come over and do an export. So if we had a traditional kind of multi-track type project, I'll just open this. And when we come to do an export audio mix down. So make sure everything is kind of labeled, as easy as possible. If you go to the project menu, there is a notepad. So if you have like tempo information, other information, you could store this in a notepad, which can be exported as a simple text file to someone else. So you can say, this is the tempo, this is what we're thinking, these are the writers, whatever credits, or information that could be passed along. Come over here and we could choose multiple. So I could say I want to take all of my group channels, render them. I want to take all of my instrument channels, all of my audio channels. We could, once we're doing this, we could choose to not render tracks. So we could have it dry. We could have like the inserts and channel strips. We could also just come over here and have the group sends. Sometimes when, I've seen some people, again, just come over here and have the notepad and say, I was using this plugin on this particular track. I was, used, this compressor with these settings, and have each of these on a notepad, and that is exported with notepad data. But coming over, just kind of getting the raw tracks out, do an export audio mix down. You can just come over here, do multiple, and then select everything. And then that will make equal length audio files of everything that someone could just import and say, start them all at the same time or at their timestamp. So. See, Jean-Marie Horvat got his problem solved, and it was a plugin like always. It's a cliche answer for a reason. So we're glad you got it sorted out, Jean-Marie. See Filter Freak just saying, yay, it's Tuesday. Yet only another 3 days till Friday. So. All right, so we see Dakota's question. What should my loudness be? I'm looking for ranges, goals for momentary max, integrated range, and true peak. Thank you. So it could really depend upon what your delivery format is. So if you're going to be doing something for Spotify or streaming service for music, it's generally minus 14 LUFS. And if you're doing something for broadcast, however, that might be minus 23 LUFS. So often, when you're working with this, you could find, the different delivery formats. You may have different loudness for, and I know people that do mixing that have different loudness targets for YouTube, for Spotify, for Amazon, for iTunes or Apple Music, and a CD and like an HD delivery system. And they may target different loudnesses for each of those. So figure out exactly what you want to deliver it to. And then you could actually, once we have your mix down file, one of the things you could do that's really clever is if you go to audio and go to processes, you could just normalize, and we could just choose to normalize by specific loudness targets here, or if you just wanted to do it by a dB value as well. So that way, if you're like a little under, you could just say normalize to minus 14 LUFS. Boom. All right, so we see, thanks by far, this is the best DAW help system I know. Any plans, Cubase, to have live performance view like Ableton and Logic recently? So, they generally don't announce, features before they're released, but, I know Steinberg is aware of people kind of wanting that particular function. So we'll see what comes in the next versions of Cubase. All right. So we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, there's a notepad. So yeah, it's a great feature. So make sure you use that. Okay. So we see from PZ136, why can't I find Hallian content? I've installed it 3 times today. Did the move from download manager and clicking in the folders. So when you do that, make sure that you, if you've done, so let's say if I keep wanting to go to the wrong program today. So let's say if we go to the Steinberg Library Manager. So make sure that when you go to your Hallian content that it's seen here. If not, wherever it's installed, you could right click on it and say open in Steinberg Library Manager, and that should make the association. One other thing to try is to go into the media bay and also just come over here to VST sound. And then like if you wanted the amped Electra, you could just come over here, make sure that it's checked in the media bay. So, and at this point you could also choose to rescan disk, and that could often make the connection as well. So try those 2 things. All right, so we see a question. Is there any way to add lyrics as a track or visible in the main editor and not only in the score editor? Markers don't serve that function quite well. So, the only way to really do it on the main editor is to do it with markers. So hopefully, I've kind of asked for that feature personally for like a lyric track. But that's really the only way to do it. So, but, if you haven't seen it, I think we showed it on a previous live stream, but we'll just kind of show it here real quick. Just open up this project. Okay, so let's say I have just a quick lyric track for markers, and once we kind of have this in, I could just at this point just say, played our records into the night. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. So we can see kind of the markers there, and one of the things that's helpful is if we come over here. We could open up the marker track, and if we go to settings, we could choose to sync the selection. So here we could just kind of see as we go on.
was okay.
And then
So long, I was so naive.
the singer's like, oh, I want to punch in the word, I've got to choose. So I could just now at this point come over here and
I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones.
so we could see kind of vertically here.
Something about it just sounds so wrong. But it's too late to start a fight. Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Just leave it alone. Oh.
So that's kind of the only way I know of to really get lyrics on. I know it's not really intended for lyrics, but in a pinch, I think it's better than nothing. And if this is kind of distracting to you visually, you could always hide like the lyric track. And if you don't want to see that kind of bunched up, you could just kind of look at it like this or make it really small if you don't want to see it. But, you know, so you have 10 different marker tracks. So I know it's not the most ideal solution, but I think it's the best one that's kind of currently in the system. Okay. All right, so we see question. Retrospective recording MIDI is very easy, but analog not so much. Can you walk us through retrospective recording analog setup in Cubase 12? All right, so let's say I will jump to, I'll just switch to a different project. All right, so how it works is, you know, because analog data is going to be, or audio data could be a lot more, you know, a lot more information. So when we come to your preferences, and it's kind of, you know, conceptually maybe a little bit different, but if we go to record audio, you'll see that you'll have audio pre-record seconds. So here it's going to be set up for 1 second. So let's say I arm this track, and we have our time set. I'll just set this for a quick, as soon as I activate the project, it's always helpful. All right, so let's say I have a punch in on starting at measure at 10 seconds here roughly. So let's say, all right, so we're going to go ahead and play. I have this track record enabled. So we'll punch in and it will punch out. All right, so now that I've have this pre-record set up, I could just roll back. And at this point, we could just roll back 1 second. I think we could do up to 60 seconds. So because it's buffering a lot of different data that could be chewing through your computer's memory in the project. So at this point, we could roll back the recording. So if you kind of miss punch, so it's not the same exact conceptually for audio, but you know, if you slightly missed a punch in or you just wanted to capture something, you could always just simply kind of roll back prior to your punch point or prior to the audio recording. Okay, so just see this probably maybe a further question about the Hallian content. It says the data in the drive is on a drive 3 times, but it doesn't show up in media library or standalone. So, you know, go, you know, on the file itself. I'm not sure if you've done this PC 136, But, right click on the file itself and then say open in, see if you see it in, so you see it in the media library or standalone. So make sure you see it in the actual Steinberg library manager. So. All right, so I just see, I would love to see Ghost Note view just like in Studio One. So I'm not sure what a Ghost Note view is, but maybe it's something. So let's say if I have. So I'm not sure if so let's say if I want to see maybe 2 different events in the editor. So if I come here, that we could see both, and I'll just kind of zoom here. All right, so I have both of these selected, and then I go into the editor that I could see both of them, and we could switch between the 2 views. And if we wanted to, so we could edit only one particular, make one active for editing and the other one not. And if we wanted to colorize based on the events as opposed to velocity, we could say, we could look at the colors by channel. So let me know if that's what you mean by ghost notes. But if not, if you could explain what ghost notes are in the R program, then that would be helpful for me to maybe get you into the right area. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just checking in from Washington State. Glad you could join us today. He's usually in Montana. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see a question. How can you make one voice sound like many voices? So one plugin that could do that is probably Cloner. So let's say we'll jump back to this particular project. I think it's under the modulation section. So let's.
We played our records into the night. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now, that was okay.
Let's try Cloner.
Guess all along I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong. What is too late to start a fight? Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Just leave it alone. Oh, you used to love when I played Hey Jude. I should have told you you were out of tune.
You can kind of blend it if you like
Whatever
to.
you did, that was okay. out in
So basically what you could do is detune. You could create kind of do like micro pitch shifting and detune and kind of pan independently here for each of the voices. So check out the cloner plugin. All right. All right, so Michael Pierce has just finished the session. He's packed and he's about to drive home. And he'll drop in when he gets home. So thanks for joining us, Michael. Look forward to seeing you. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. All right, so we see Best Green Jesus just has discarded his email question in. So, all right, so we have Jerome Gibson says hi from Newport, Oregon. Greg, can you show us how to use MIDI Learn when creating a MIDI device panel and assigning functions? Okay, so let's come over here to our MIDI device panel. I haven't done this in a while. So we'll go to our MIDI device manager. Let's install device. We'll just define a new one. We'll do the new Yamaha keyboards released last week. So let's say we want to use all 16 MIDI channels here. Okay, let's say it's connected to my UR24C. It's been a while since I've done this. So. All right, so we're going to now come over here and add panel. So let's say, okay, I want it to be general size. All right, so let's say we want to add a fader. All right, and I want this to be volume on this particular device. Let's add a knob here. So once you've kind of come in and let's say you've defined the different So I'm not sure if you actually, once you know kind of what the actual data is, that there's kind of a learn function to do this, because you're just kind of actually, whether it's going to be sysx data or whether it's going to be, we could come over here. So, generally the learned function isn't going to be actually accessed inside of this, because but once we have, let's say, our panel set up, let me just come over here. I'm going to add, let's say, a MIDI track. And we want this going to Modi X and that I think you could learn to function here, but a lot of times these are kind of, the device panels are meant to kind of be the editors themselves. But let's see if we could. So I'm not sure if you're trying to learn the sysx data for the device or if you're trying to learn it to remote control it. But let's say if we come over here to our quick controls, that I think that you might be able to set it up to the device panels here. But maybe if you could let me know, Jerome, what exactly you wanted to do exactly with the learning with it. All right, so we have a question, how to separate / record Groove Agent drum components to individual audio tracks and mixer for mixing later. Okay. Okay, so let's say we have our Groove Agent here, and let's say as we play, we'll open this up. All right, so let's say I'll break apart my MIDI into different outputs. So I'll go to my mix console here. We can see everything's now going into one particular channel. So let's say I want kick to go out of my main kit mix. I want snare to go out of output 2. I want hi-hat, output 3, and let's say overheads 4 and 5 for our. So we have multiple outputs that we could see directly here, all being. So if I wanted to actually, I'm going to just copy over a pattern here. Sorry about that. So if I have like a MIDI pattern, and if I wanted to just kind of, render that or break it into separate tracks, I'm going to select the event. We'll come over to audio, or to edit rather, and go to render in place, and we'll go to our render settings. And here I just want to make sure that I have channel settings selected. So I'm going to select just this one particular event with my drums all on individual events, and then I'll just say render. If I did everything right, we'll have our kick, snare, our overheads, and let's say our room mics all kind of split out to different tracks. So once it's actually set to different outputs, just go to render in place and make sure that you have channel settings selected, and then that should just automatically work for you. So drum, Gibson's just saying cloner on snare drums, always fun. Gerald Ely saying didn't know about a cloner plugin, another learning moment. All right, so we have Tata Digital Studio saying hi to everyone. So glad to see you back. And we see Chris Hallam checking in from Athens, Georgia. So we have a question. Do you have a video? Okay, how to mix vocals properly, and also how to mix an entire song. If yes, link to the video. So, I think every project is going to be different. I'm always leery of people that just say, for every song, do this EQ, do this effect, do this, and then, people wonder why songs all kind of sound similar. So I always kind of take the approach that, every song presents unique challenges and unique opportunities for mixing. And, I try not to use so much, to actually, have a cookie cutter approach, because it doesn't really work. You could have EQ frequencies that don't work because the key of the song is different. So it's all going to be different. All right, so you see, how do I get my Akai MPK88 controller to fully function as a controller? So it should work, but if you're setting up for MIDI remote, all you'd have to do is, I'm going to go ahead and just delete this one here quickly. But, any of the functions that you actually have in your system, so let's say, okay, I want it to, if you're dealing with MIDI remote, you could just come and say, okay, I want this to be, and there's Akai controllers in here, but I'm just going to say, okay, it's going to be a Nectar controller. Like I have a P4. Okay, and we're going to use the correct in and out ports here. Okay, and if we wanted to start building controllers, so we'll create a MIDI control surface. So let's say, okay, I have transport buttons. So I'm going to come over here and choose a button. So you say, okay, this is going to be, and now I could just come over here and hit buttons on my controller. So if they're going to be faders or sliders, we could adjust all these parameters. And as you move the buttons or move the fader, move the knob, move the slider, you could kind of pick the shape, and you could basically mimic your own controls, like how your controller is laid out for you. And then you could double click on units itself and open the mapping assistant, and then assign these objects that were created to just come over here, and you could, have it do thousands of different functions in the program itself. So you're able to kind of do, a tremendous amount right here. So, but also look for, make sure that you reach out to Akai and that they are working on scripts for the, for the MPK88 as well for Cubase. Okay, so you see question. Is there a way to record over an audio event and still be able to hear the previous layer or take while recording, then mute it by command or automatically when the mic receives input? So generally, it's, if you're recording, there's going to be kind of one sound on a track at a time. So if you, record audio, like if you want it to punch in, so we have unlimited tracks. So it's not like kind of older days when we had to worry so much about, like, oh, I have 16 tracks or 8 tracks, 4 tracks, 24 tracks. But if you wanted to monitor until the recording goes in, if we go to preferences to VST, we could set it to tape machine style. So let's say if I have a punch in, I would hear the audio before, I would hear what I'm recording during the punch in, and then it would automatically monitor the audio afterwards. So just to show this, let's say. But basically, we have one different sound at a time on an audio track. If you need it to have other sounds on the audio track, just use a different audio track, because then it could be, very confusing. This track is playing 3 sounds, or which one is right. So, All right, so we see the artist known as Love checking in from New York, and he wants everyone to hit the like button. So, and just a quick mention in case you don't know, we are doing, Steinberg is having a big Cubase promotion for Studio Weeks going on. So I think it's 40% off of new versions of Cubase 12, and as well as upgrades and updates. So if you've been waiting to upgrade, you could do that. Also, for existing users and new users, you'll get up to 5 different plugin vouchers. So a great suite of different plugins that's available as well. So make sure you take advantage. If you go to the Steinberg website, you could see more information on that. So take advantage of it. It's a wonderful promotion. All right, so we see Val Lee saying hi to all the fellow Cubase users, and we see Cubase X saying hello to the Cubase family. Okay, so we see a clarification from Jerome Gibson. It says, my MIDI controller is hard to set up for controlling my rack mount synths. I want to use MIDI device panels to control external synths and my MIDI controller to control the panel. All right, so let's see if I can maybe modify it a little bit, see if we can get it going. But yeah, it's a problem with external rack mount synths being hard to control. It's kind of a universal thing. Which is why they're not so popular anymore. Sorry, I haven't made device panels in a long time. All right, so hang on, see if I can. I may have to play around with it a little more, show for next time, but let's see if I get it going here for this. Okay, so we have our device panels here. So I haven't tried to MIDI learn them before. So I'll play around with it, Jerome, if you want to just send me a quick email to see if I can figure out how to get these to. But let's see if we could go to quick controls, if we see device panels. Okay, so yeah, if once you have this set up, so once you have the parameter set up, there's 8 quick controls that you could use to kind of modify between them, and then you could switch the quick controls. So once we kind of look here, we can see the different naming. So I see my CC pan and modulation that we've set up here. So we could control those through quick controls. You could then save presets, and so you have access to 8 different parameters at once. And then if you needed another 8 parameters, you could just open up a different preset. So I think you need to control these through quick controls. I'll play around with it more and see if there's a different approach to it, but at least you could do that. Sorry, it took a little while. All right, so we have questions from Jay from Connecticut. So we see question 1. If Nuendo is like Cubase with more features equivalent on par with price, would the team be so kind as to consider including Nuendo owners on Cubase's software promo giveaways? So, there could be different promotions. Generally there's going to be, different promotions for Nuendo and Cubase, but I'll make sure to kind of pass that along as a feature request. But maybe generally in historical terms, there is a Nuendo promo that shortly follows a Cubase promo, so that's often how it works. So we see a question: is there a way for de-esser to automatically move the range points around the red essing indicators automatically instead of requiring the user to manually find? So currently, I don't know of a way to do that, but generally you don't have to. It's not that hard to kind of dial in the particular de-essing frequencies for that. So. Okay, so we see a question from Eric Jerome. When is the next live? So we do these every Tuesday and Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We usually go for about 4 hours or until we get all the questions answered. Okay, so we see a question. I have a native instrument guitar where I play a chord on my MIDI keyboard and it plays the arpeggio guitar. How can I make that instrument track an audio track with the arpeggio? So I don't think that you could apply, so generally if it's kind of like a instrument, just load up a quick. Yeah, I don't think I've installed it on here, but let me just. All right, so let's say if I'm here, so generally a lot of times what happens is the chord. So if you want to have, so you play a chord on the MIDI keyboard and it's going to play back kind of the arpeggio. So, if we have this kind of recorded, let me just. So, once we have kind of the audio of this, so let's say if if you want to turn it straight into audio, we could, once we have the chords at this point, we could do something like we could add a group channel to the selected channels. And let's add an audio track where that is the group is the input. So now as I would play, so now anytime that we come over here, we can. And then that would be recorded as audio as well. So we could just simply, record both the MIDI and have the MIDI transmit it to audio, or you could choose to render in place. But if you wanted the arpeggio that's being triggered for the guitar to be applied to other audio tracks, I think that's a limitation of the plugin itself. I don't know any that could really do that. All right, so we see Graham Witcher checking in from Royal Wootton Bassett in the UK. He's just thanking Steinberg for the current promotion. He's enjoying his CS80. That's great. Okay, so we see so from Peter K, thank you so much for your help the other day. Can you please explain the little clock button on the bottom left? So I think it's maybe this, which is the constrained delay compensation button. So what the constrained delay compensation allows you to do is if we have a lot of plugins that are taking a lot, and sometimes some of the bigger plugins that are more demanding, they take more time to do processing. So that could be more time and that means that the latency for the plugins can be high. So if we're recording something and, all of a sudden it sounded very delayed to us while we're recording, because as we're recording, it's playing back through the latent plugins. So if we, instead of having to bypass each of the plugins, which, as you know, could be like 40 or 50 or sometimes a couple hundred plugins that are causing a lot of latency, what Cubase can do is actually just bypass all the plugins that have a latency above a certain point so that you could record with minimal delay or minimal latency in monitoring. So that's what this is going to allow you to do right here, is just to kind of bypass all the plugins that are causing latency so that when you go to record, the latency will be minimized. So you don't have to do that one by one for every single button or every single plugin. You could just do it globally, and that's what that does. All right. Okay, so we see also, is there a way to get fader slides for sends or knobs? Okay, so when we come here and we look at our sends, we'll generally kind of just see, so I'll just come over here and so say we add our cloner plugin. So generally it's always going to be just like a little bit of a slider here for the sends. And that allows you to have kind of multiple stacked vertically. Well, let's see if there's any difference in the large mix console. So we'll come over here to EQ. So yeah, it's always going to be kind of a horizontal slider for that. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Graham Witcher is just saying it's a wonderful time to switch their DAW to Cubase, especially if you have friends that you've always been kind of, you know, that you think should be running Cubase. It's a wonderful time for them to check it out. All right, so we see yes from Jerome Gibson. Yes, the Akai controller, Groove Agent Learn thing. Can we? Sorry, just can we adopt that to control external hardware? So it's often going to be whatever your external hardware will be doing. But you know, Jerome, check out the. I'll play around with it more, see if there's a different approach other than doing quick controls for that. But, you know, whatever message your external hardware is doing, you know, you could have the Akai controller spit that out and pass it right through Cubase. So. All right. So we see question. Hello, is there a way to make Cubase a live arranger? Like when you press a chord on the keyboard, it will play a minor loop, and when you shift to another chord, it will continue to play it. So many times, you know, that's going to be up to, so Cubase doesn't do that. You know, it's not like a Genos or a Tyros keyboard. It's an arranger workstation. Many plugins will allow you to do that, like many guitar plugins will allow you to just kind of play the chord and then have it, you know, do live arranging. But it's usually, you know, it's usually most for doing, you know, lots of stuff with individual plugins. You know, you can obviously use Cubase for live stuff, as a lot of people do. We see, so, you know, and if you wanted to do, you know, you could have it automatically follow chord tracks and stuff like that. So, but if it's more along the lines of kind of like an arranger workstation keyboard, you know, Cubase used to have stuff like that and it wasn't really utilized that much. So, all right. Wonderful to see Grant Nicholas on the live stream from Baltimore. Hope you're doing well, buddy. All right, so we see I have a reference track that keeps changing tempo in small increments. Is there a way to change the audio track to a steady tempo? Yeah, we did this just a little while ago, but we'll do it quickly again in case. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Show it one more time here. So we could use the tempo detect function to actually figure out exactly what the tempo variations are in the particular project. So I'll come over. we go. All right, so we don't have any tempo with this. So what we need to do, again, we showed this just a little while ago. Go to tempo detection, and we'll see analyze. And now we know what we kind of know what the tempo fluctuations are on this particular track. So as we work with this, what we want to do now is to select the event or events. Go to audio, and we'll say for your reference track, we'll select that, and let's come over to audio to advanced, and we'll set definition from tempo. And what that's going to do is basically we see all these different tempo changes at, basically on each beat, and it will figure out and basically embed that into the audio file or into the project. And now we could say, I want this to play back. I'm going to deactivate the current tempo and say I want it to be 140. And have it be perfectly steady. So instead of following the tempo changes here that we see, playing back at this, and so everything is speeding up and slowing down to play back now at a steady tempo for something that had varying tempo before. All right, so we see a question. How can I add a specific distance or add specific time in place of the ruler without mismatching the instruments recorded tracks? Hope that makes sense to you, what is required of my situation. All right. Okay, so let's say I wanted to place maybe like 5 seconds of silence in the middle here. So let's say I switch my timeline to bars and beats, or just a specified amount of time. So I'm going to come here. So let's say we can see my length. I want this to be 30 seconds, let's say. So I'm just going to come here, 30.00. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Couldn't get to my cough button fast enough. All right. So now if I understand, maybe if you want to set everything. So if we do a global, and we could set a range globally by holding Control or Command plus Shift. But let me know if this is what you want to do, where we could just say insert silence. And at that point, we could just have everything kind of notch over, but we could set that particular range. So once we have the range, we could actually see the range length here. So if you need to set it for a specific amount of time, you could just adjust in the range length to match. So let me know if that's what you want to do. All right, so it says, can we assign the default color to track types? MIDI equals green, audio equals yellow, etc. So you could have a default track color, but it won't necessarily differentiate between MIDI and audio tracks. But you could set up a project logical editor preset. So let's say I wanted to have audio tracks, and let's say I have instrument tracks, or MIDI tracks. So I'll just come here. So if we want to set up like a project, and we could set up a macro to be both of these conditions. So let's get to our project logical editor. Many times people will start with a template that does this. So let me just remove. So let's say I want to, media type is, we'll just say, so I'm going to say audio tracks, and we'll say set color to fixed value. So you can say, okay, I want audio tracks to be green. So now when I come over here, all audio tracks could be that color. And then we could say MIDI tracks, I want to be red. So you could have, you could have two of these different processes stored in a macro, and then just simply hit a button, and then all your instrument tracks, as they're added, could switch like that if necessary. All right, so we see Matt Elston joining. You don't have to worry about being late. See, Mopman just says, I'm always learning something new here. Love it. So glad you're learning something new. All right, so he says, how can we do tempo detection on a MIDI track? Can we use the same tempo analysis function as we do for audio, or is there another way? I apologize if you've covered this in the past. You have no question, no apologies necessary. So yeah, you can take the same exact functionality that we do for audio tempo detection for MIDI as well. So. All right, we see Emil just saying, hey guys, I think in preferences you can assign colors to specific track types for audio tracks. So let's take a look at that just real quick. I think you might be able to do something. So let's say track type color defaults. Yeah, that's a great point. So let's just say audio, I want to be red, and MIDI, I want to change that to more yellowish. So now as we add MIDI tracks, let's add a couple audio tracks here. And I may have preferences. So yeah, but if you want to do that also, come over to just preferences, and then you could say track type default colors. So you could change it there as well. Thanks for mentioning that, Emil. All right, so we see from AJ Soundbites, considering buying it. And also it is on offer to October 3rd, 2022. Issue is there are so few tutorials on Cubase, and it's taking a while to figure things out. So there's probably thousands of tutorials. So, if you go through these youtube.com/Cubase, there's probably 1,000 different tutorials. We've done probably about 240 live streams. They're average about 4 hours each on that you could see on the Cubase YouTube channel as well. So maybe if you look, but also check out Chris Salim and check out Dom Segalis. But there's and check out the Cubase Nation Discord as well. See, John Costigan says, if you learn something new, hit the like button. So. All right, let me see. I think we might be at the end of questions for now. Let's see if we have any that sneak in. If not, we will kind of sneak over to some of the questions that were sent in. Okay, so let's go through some of the questions that were mailed in advance. Thanks for all the great questions so far. Okay, so we had a question mailed in. How does the audio alignment feature work? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so let's say we have like a number of background vocals. We'll just go ahead and we could see, probably visually see that these aren't going to line up as we would hope when we are looking at these. So let's go ahead and take a listen to it.
Somos iguales. Somos iguales.
Okay, so let's say what we want to do is open up the alignment functions, and we could do that just by clicking on this little icon or going into the audio alignment. We want to just kind of pick one, and we'll use this as an alignment reference, and I could select multiple events here, and we're going to choose these as our targets. So we can see kind of visually as we highlight them that their timing is a little bit off. And we could have choices for matching words or prefer time shifting. And I'll just set the alignment precision to 100%. Why not? And just come here. See if my machine's going to cooperate now. Taking much longer than usual. And now that we look at it, we listen to it again. You can see. I may have hit it twice. I'm not sure why it's taking so long. But if you now visually look at it, and we'll listen to it here, and when it gets done, we can see that the alignment has already been kind of handled for us. Let me just close out real quick.
Iguales. Somos iguales.
All right, so then we could see that it will just align the audio and just kind of line it up rhythmically like that. All right. So we have a question. Is there a way to overlay a template into an existing project use case. I have an orchestral session built on VE Pro, MIDI-based template in Rosetta. I want to run these in a new M1 native template. I have built in contact instances directly in tracks, purged and disabled on load. The only way I could think of is to import all the MIDI tracks from the existing session into the new template and move the MIDI data onto the tracks. But if I could go the other way, opening the old project in M1 would disable the VEP plugin. Then I could import the new M1 template, retain all the existing structures, tempos, temps, etc., etc. Alternatively, I have saved all the tracks in the new template as track presets. Could bring them in one at a time. It'd be great if I could save folders or groups of tracks as presets. So you can't save multiple track presets. So let's say if I just want it to come, I'll go to more of an orchestral thing. So let's say we have just a little bit. Need to get some samples loaded up here. Try a different project. All right, so we can just do this. All right, so, but if you want it to come over here, let's go ahead and just save track preset. And we'll call this orc template. All right, so now if we wanted to come over here to media, let's go to user presets, track presets, under multi, and we'll see our orc template that you could just now drag those over like that. So, select them. And then you can save multiple ones as a particular track preset. So you can save multiple files as track presets, and just simply at that point, you could drag it over and it's going to show up under, so go to Media Bay, User Presets, Track Presets, Multi, and then you'll see your orchestral template, and then you could just drag and drop that in. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we have a question. I was a Logic user for a decade and recently switched to Nuendo for film production and field recording stuff, and I'm facing little hard time in getting used to the new workspace. My question is, sometimes my workflows require to use two different audio interfaces, one for A to D converter or input device, and one separate for D to A converter as output device. In Logic, there's an option in the audio preferences to assign input and output device separately. How to do the same in Cubase and Nuendo. So really all we have to do, this is going to be part of the Apple audio MIDI setup. So we're going to come to our setup here. We'll go to applications, and this is kind of a Mac OS unique thing. And there could be some issues with it with latency, but we'll go to utilities and we'll go to audio MIDI setup. So we'll open this up and it will default to the audio devices. Click here in the lower left hand corner in the plus sign, you'll see create aggregate device. And at this point we could choose, okay, I want these different devices to be utilized. Now in Cubase, what you want to do once we have that aggregate device configured, we go to your studio menu to studio setup, and instead of choosing your audio interface here, we would see, and once we have that done, you would just see, aggregate device there listed. So once that's configured, so then you could have multiple input and output devices. Okay, so another question. Is there a way to use Vari Audio in real time so it'll display the pitch of the singer while recording? If not, are there any other plugins that can show real-time pitch detection of the vocal input from microphone? So, if you're doing this for like an audio source, right, so let's say, so in real time, what you could do is, so Vari Audio is going to be after it's recorded because it needs to do an analysis of the file, so it's not going to do it in real time. If you wanted real-time correction of your audio file, what you could do is come over to the inserts, and you'll see under pitch shift, the pitch correct plugin. So you can get a sense, and here you could snap it to be in tune if you want it, and you could put that on an input channel, and actually at that point, as we put it on an input channel, it could correct the pitch and it could show you kind of visually what's going on. If you just want to be able to see how out of tune something is, try going under tools to tuner. And then you could actually, like as someone is singing, you could put this on the input channel or on the track itself. And you could get a sense like, okay, they're, 10 cents flat, 10 cents sharp. They're really flat, really sharp on this. You could use the tuner plugin as well. But the Vari Audio is going to be after it's recorded and then be able to, at that point, do the editing of it. But if you need real-time options, consider the pitch correct plugin or the tuner plugin as a visual reference. All right, so let me just open up a different project. All right, it says with tempo detection. All right, so it says I really struggle with the tempo track at times. It doesn't work all that intuitively. I'm setting up something for a session on Tuesday, and I'll work the long way around in the meantime. But in essence, in July, we sent out scratch tracks, but they weren't to a click. My mistake. So I have tracks with variable tempo, some of which we want, some of which we don't. I've manually grid aligned the tracks, embedded the tempo info, and here's where I get to have some fun. I want to lock in different parts of the track to different tempos. If you look at the image, which Michael is kind enough to send, I managed to do that for the first chorus. I have no idea how the process tempos seem to work, but now it's grayed out. So whilst the first chorus is at 85, I think for the second selection, I want to fix it to 91 BPM. My internal logic seems to say that if I select the points, type 91 left-hand space, that they should all move to 91, but only the first selected point does. This may be by design, but it doesn't seem to make sense. Is there any way I can batch edit a number of range of tempo points numerically like that to conform the tempos audio for that length of time? All right, so I'm going to do a quick tempo detection again of this audio file. So we'll come here to your project, tempo detection. Okay, so we have our tempo here, and I'll just hide my... Okay, so I think in this case what they want to do is at a specific point in time have a steady tempo. So I'm going to, while this file is selected, again, go to audio, and we want to embed all these tempo change data into the file itself. So we'll go to audio and advanced and set definition from tempo. Okay. So I think instead of just, if we wanted these measures to be a steady tempo, what I would do is to select, like if I wanted these measures, I would just move like this selection over. So let's say, okay, I want this to be, starting at this point. So I want to select the one after. And how we could select the tempo events is make sure that if we're in kind of the combined range tool, so if I select with the range, I don't want to do that because that's selecting kind of the range and events, but it's not actually selecting the events. So make sure that you have kind of the normal object selection tool, select the one after, come right over here, and at that point, just hit, I think we could just hit delete or backspace, and now that will be a steady tempo until the next event occurs. So just select the particular range instead of trying to set all of these to a known value. Let's see if we could even do it in maybe the project browser, maybe. So if I have these all set, let's say I want all these to be, so instead of like, selecting multiple tempo nodes, just get rid of the nodes that you don't want. And then it will play back at that particular tempo. So let's say now if we're listening to, so now it's going to be just a perfect steady tempo. And then if I wanted to, fluctuate again. So at this point, use the selection tool, delete. And then you could just kind of slow down. So instead of trying to set all of them, because, you set one at a time, but, if you don't need them, you don't need them. And if you wanted to, if you're worried about getting back to the original, just come here and create a track version of your tempo track and just do kind of the edits on this one. So say we delete, and then if you have to, say, oh, I just totally messed that up, I want to get all the data back. You could always have your original data there in a different tempo track version. So give that a try and let me know. I think that'll work. All right, and we had another tempo question. So the question is, I've tempo matched all the bars of recording. I was going back through it, adding some double time bars and halftime bars for some of the alignment I did. Then I ended up with a little problem. So in this, we see, so measure 577 is a bar of 8/4, 578 is a bar of 4/4, and 579 is a bar of 5/4, with 580 being back to 4/4. I tried a few things and nothing worked, but my final tracks was this, and when the result was every time I constrained 579 to 5/4 with 2 bars of 4/4, and then changed 579 to be 5/4. But what happened is every time, rather than to change constraint of space, I have 5 beats. It shifted everything along, 1 beat destroying the tempo alignment. All right, so it's good. Now, once we've done, let's say, our tempo track here, and we kind of know what the meter is, So let's just listen to it. All right, so now as the tempo detection has occurred, Cubase will place everything into, basically 1/4 for the meter. So what we want to do is to, define kind of the downbeat. So let's say we play. So we have a pickup note here. So before coming over, so let's say, okay, I want this to be, if I did it in the wrong area. So I'm just going to click here and I'm just going to turn my snap on. So, as we listen to it, so let's say now I want this to be 8/4. And so, before I would get into the editing, that's when I would just kind of listen to it and drop in the meter changes. And at that point, you could just say, okay, I want to, just switch back and forth between my meters. So, and as I do it that way, I noticed in the picture that was sent along with the question that the tempo had, adjusted like halfway down using 8/4. But, let me know if I think that should work for you. But a lot of times before I do a lot of editing, I'll just kind of, listen to it and see, so you may not have an 8/4 bar sounds a little strange. It would be two measures of 4/4 probably, but if you wanted to just kind of switch between 5/4 and 4/4, so I think if you notated something as an 8/4 bar, could throw off people like in a notation side. But let me know if that will work. All right, so we have some questions about Groove Agent, but Best Korean Jesus said he is kind of working with it. And yeah, thanks for sending the video, Best Korean Jesus. And just for your information, I couldn't get mine to crash like you were doing. So let me know. And if you want to send me an email, if the customer service was able to help you with that. But I couldn't reproduce the crashes on my Mac or PC. All right, so we have a question. Hi, is it possible to set up macros and MIDI remotes, such as the MIDI remote panel is active buttons that could be assigned to macros or anything else of that matter, rather than requiring a MIDI input device? I can do this by making a TouchOS controller and an iPad, but having a panel of buttons on the lower panel would be awesome. This is from Colin. So currently, when we look at like the MIDI remote, the lower zone, this isn't at this point intended to actually transmit when we click on different elements. I have a personal long-standing feature request for that, so that instead of having like an iPad to do that you could have zones that do that. So maybe that will come as like a part 2 of the MIDI remote, where you could just kind of make your own. Not only these respond to MIDI controllers, but have these fire off different functions as well. But currently it doesn't do that, and you would need to either trigger it from a MIDI message in the MIDI remote, but the MIDI remote, just clicking on the button doesn't actually execute the function. But you could set up the external MIDI device to execute the function that's been defined. So it's not quite there. So you'd still need to, have MIDI or, something to trigger this particular object instead of triggering it with the actual, clicking on it with the mouse or assigning keyboard shortcuts to it. So sorry about that. All right, let's jump back to our questions. Thanks for all the great questions. find my chat. All right. All right, so a question. Hi, Greg. Does Cubase have a way to measure the overall flat or sharp each singer of a choir is, so mixer knows to lower the volume fader for those with lower score and increase volume for the better singers? So, like, if we have, if it's perfectly isolated, we might be able to see if we... Okay, so let's say as we... Okay, let me just see if I move this slightly. So we can kind of, nudge it into, we could have it snap to the particular event. But when we look at it, I don't think that there's any indication of how many cents it's off. But I don't think that, if you have a choir where you have, probably if people are singing together, at that point, if there's probably going to be bleed through. So there's not going to be anything that's going to, it's going to be something that's probably going to have to be manually done. Where, but so, we could correct the tuning inside, but obviously if you have like 3 people singing together into a microphone and one of them is flat, but maybe they're closer to another microphone to lower that, there isn't kind of an automated system for that, unfortunately, that I know of. So. And it's great to see you on the live stream, Ted. Hope you're well. All right. So you see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, is the alignment tool available only in Pro? So I believe it is only, I believe it's only in the Pro version. So, but if you go to the Steinberg, let me clear my throat. But if you go to the Steinberg website, there is a very detailed comparison between like what features and functionalities are in, the different levels of Cubase. So you could find out for sure there, but I'm inclined to think that it's only going to be available in the Pro version. So you just see a comment, it's hard about the number of Cubase tutorials. So a lot of times, I think that Steinberg, probably does like, probably 2 to 3 tutorials a week for our, so you may see more people doing other tutorials for maybe other programs because the companies themselves aren't doing as many tutorials. So I think that if you kind of look at all the tutorials that are available for Steinberg products, that there's probably more tutorials. But since Steinberg actually takes the time to generate them and do them, that, it may not seem as widespread because most people could go to the Cubase YouTube channel or to the Discord and be able to find stuff very easily. All right. So we just see a question. Hi, Greg. Could you show how to sidechain a reverb with a compressor to reduce reverb when, for example, playing? Okay. So let's see if I could. See if I can come up with a good scenario for this. Let's try this project. Okay, so all right, so we have.
It caught my breath while you called me to. We'll leave it now.
All right, so let's say we have too much reverb on our vocal. Or let's try the guitar.
Right after that Garth Brooks show.
So let's say I want the guitar reverb here to sidechain from the vocal. Okay, so we're gonna take.
Do you recall the day we first met?
Okay, so what I want to do is see if I remember how to get this set up. Okay, so let's take our verb here. Okay, so we're going to go to our plate reverb. So it's our effects channels.
That was a long, long time ago. In the 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry.
All right, so now I'm going to put a compressor on the after the plate.
Your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to. Well, leave it now. I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago. Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long, long time ago. Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. In the 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. Caught my breath.
All right, let's see.
You
Let me just check this real quick and go to the effects return. So I'm on the effects return channel. I think if we. Okay. Let's see if I take more of the lead vocal.
called me to. Well, leave it now.
I may have to switch the order.
Now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So now we can hear, it's kind of an extreme example, but so on the effects channel itself, I put a compressor after the reverb. And for the sidechain input, I put the lead vocal. So as soon as the vocalist stops singing, you'll hear the guitar reverb just kind of.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. You caught my breath while you caught me too. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So you could just put it after the reverb send, and then this way I have the vocal feeding the sidechain of the particular track here, and so we could send more of the vocal in.
Like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that garden,
The vocal stop, and
you told your daddy and he called my mom's.
you could obviously implement it better, but that will give you kind of the mechanics. So you want to just basically on the effects return channel, put a compressor after that, and then sidechain that from the source. You see from Jersey Boy Beats has been using Cubase. I guess it's about time to learn Cubase. So yeah. All right, so we see from Ted Springman, this is going back about the choir question. So it says, my choir question is theoretical. The choir in question is actually me singing cycled passes or playing cycled violin passes, and would like to know how to visually mix up better takes and vice versa. You know, so a lot of times when, you know, like I see people wanting to do, like make all the pitch correction perfect and be able to take the sources that are down. But especially for string and like choral stuff, a lot of times that's what makes the chorus sound big is the slight tuning problems. So, often, I know people that, will go through like with almost like an exacting level of editing and try to make everything perfect. And then it just doesn't quite sound so organic. The reason that people doubled vocals was, often, not that it was actually going to be the same exact thing, but the slight changes made it sound thicker and better. So, you have a string section because they'll play, each of the players will play a little bit out of tune, and that's what makes it sound so good. So don't be afraid to embrace that. And, sometimes you may just have bad recordings and you could just take those out. And again, it's going to depend on the song and each of the takes, I think. So, all right. So we see question. Is there a way to assign a shortcut or quickly open the mixer window, yet not as an enlarged window, besides opening the lower zone and then clicking on the mix console? So if you hit F3, that will always take you to the to the larger mixer, wherever you're at. So just F3. And I think if you hit option F3, that will always take you to the lower zone mixer. So even if the lower zone is set to something else, so F3 will do like the large screen mixer. And if you want to immediately go to Alt or Option plus F3, that will take you to the mixer in the lower zone and activate it for you. All right, so we see, thanks for the native instruments, guitar to audio with groups. It sort of worked, but I had to send the instrument to the group. Only then did the audio track get info. But of course now it's twice as loud. So, once you have it, so if you have the original source and you're happy with it, you could definitely mix with that. But, if you want to turn it into audio, once it's rendered into audio, you could probably mute the original source because then it'll just be playing back twice. So. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And once again, if you aren't aware, there is a Steinberg promotion going on for Cubase 12. So you could, even if you are an existing Cubase 12 users, you have 5 plugins. Like Cubase Pro users, you have 5 different plugins that you could install. Or if you have friends that are looking to get into Cubase, it's 40% off for new purchases or 40% off for upgrades and updates as well. All right, we see Michael Pierce has made it back. And he has mini apocalyptic rain and lightning on the way on his journey back from home from his studio. So glad he made it back safely. See, Michael Pierce is apologizing for leaving verbose mode on. It's better to have more information and not enough, so it's always fine. Hope your session went well. All right, you see Graham Witcher is looking forward to Michael Pierce's soup recipes. And that just reminds me, we haven't seen Michael Teams with all the ice cream, so maybe he's enjoying his retirement Labor Day off. Maybe he'll be able to make it in. All right. So we see, hello, Greg, how to make a macro or logical editor to move selected track to an already created folder by name, i.e. move selected track to folder named bass. All right, so I don't think that there's a way to move tracks to a particular folder. I mean, we can create folders, but I don't know if we could actually move. I'll take a look. I don't think that there's a key command way of doing it. Yeah, I don't think that there's a way to do that. Let me just take a look in the Project Logical Editor. But I haven't really found a way in the past to, we could transform, select, deselect. We go to track operations. There's not like a move to type of function in the Project Logical Editor. We can move it to specific areas, but not necessarily kind of up or down. If you want to send me an email, Paul, and just as a brain cramp reminder, I'll try to play around with it between now and the live stream on Friday. right, just moving on. All right, just reading through comments. So thanks for all the great questions. All right, so I see Michael Pierce going to send a video. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be great. All right. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, how can I simultaneously name all my tracks with different names as opposed to clicking off and clicking on each name one at a time? All right, so the trick is with this is just double click, type the name in, hit the tab key. That will take you to the next track. Hit the tab key once you're done, tab. So as we just kind of come over here, so say if I do a new project, so I add 16 audio tracks, double click in the first name field, type the name, tab, and that will take you to the next one and just name that particular track for you just like that. So it's a good trick. All right, so we see a question. I'm probably the millionth person to ask this, but is the person streaming Cubase with audio? Or are they doing the voice meter thing? So no, what I do is I just use one audio interface for Cubase, my microphone, and the audio output of my Cubase audio interface goes into a Yamaha mixer with USB output. And then the USB output is what I use for the stream. I send that into OBS. So that way I have two different streams, two different audio interfaces, and that works really well. And that way I could change all sorts of sample rates, and I could go crazy with my built-in audio interface without having to always worry. I could also use loopback on my audio interface as well. But I just have this set up and it works really well, and I don't have to think about it when I have lots of other things to think about in answering all the questions during a live stream. So. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to use the control room to monitor the headphone software without affecting the mixdown out using the audio out 1 and 2, or should I use an alternative output? So once it's in the control room for monitoring, this doesn't, so when we have effects processing going on here, it's not going to be going through the main mix. So this way you could have room correction software, and it's going to be just on the monitoring path, but not going to be on the exported mix down file. So. Okay, so just see from Best Screen Jesus says, I know my bugs with Groove Agent are special. I still can't get the exclusive sample chops to work since summer 2021. So when I was working with that for Best Screen Jesus, that worked the same way as I saw in your video, but everything else, like adding the effects, everything was fine. So I was curious if you had... and Best Screen Jesus, as you know, we'll just show it here. So it's just for kind of, so we can show this to other people as well. So we have just a, let's say all right, so we have just sounds loaded in. All right, and what Best Green Jesus was running into is when he would go to the mixer, and let's say we have this going to output or to bus 2, and we put a delay on. So say, okay. All right, and we adjusted delay, and that when he would come and do edits of the samples, so say that he would get a system crash, but I haven't been able to mimic that. And I tried it on my my studio PC as well. So without, and let's say, okay, I just want to put like a filter on. So as I do this and go back to, edit samples, move stuff around, I haven't been able to get any of that to actually cause any instability on my system. So let's say if we come over again and just activate the delay. So nothing. So make sure that you're running, the latest version. I think this is the latest one, 5.11. So June 1st. And also it could be that just like we have preferences for Cubase, and I think you're on Windows, but if you go, see if I can open up my web browser one more time erroneously. All right. But check also if you go to Finder, and if you go to the preferences, that you'll probably have Cubase preferences, but you could also have Groove Agent SE preferences, and maybe see what happens if you move those preferences off like to your desktop and then reboot and see if it works differently than you. So works differently for you. All right, so we see question, got any bright scheme skins? So if you wanted to change kind of the appearance to lighter, all you'd have to do is come over to your preferences, and then once we go to color schemes, here you can see a number of different sources. So if you want like the project area background to be white, you could come over here and set different grid lines, cycle regions, so you could change the colors in many different aspects directly here. So again, go to your preferences under user interface and go to color schemes. And let's go ahead and I'll just get it back to my defaults. So you can modify a lot of different aspects right there. All right, so we see how long does it take to understand Cubase when you come from another DAW? So, I think everyone could have a different kind of learning time. So it's not kind of universal where you say, it's 22 hours or something like that. So, a lot of it could be muscle memory or how ingrained your workflow is in other programs. But, think of it like learning a new instrument. But I would say it's fairly intuitive. In comparison to all the other DAWs, it just does more. So, there's a lot more in Cubase than other programs. So sometimes what happens is, as you're doing that, you don't have to use all the advanced features. So, figure out exactly what you want to accomplish, and then, learn how to do that, and then like as you need to do different things, just kind of learn that. So. All right, so we have a question. Hello from Amsterdam. Could you run through how to record an effects track to an audio track? When I route directly, it never connects. I always have to route using a group track. Thanks. All right. So let's jump back to... All right, and I'll revert this since I've destroyed names. Okay, so let's say we have a guitar. We'll try just recording it straight.
Day we first met.
So this guitar has this plate on it. So you're gonna add an audio track. Set the effects, so say the plate as the input. All right, so now so I may have to send it to a group, but let me just see if we could look like it was available. All right, I'm just going to delete this track. All right, so let me just route this to a group. All right, I'm just going to try with this simpler project where see if we get this going. Okay, so let's see, we route it through a group now. So, but another way of doing it, maybe a different approach is, let's say, is to take this and let's say, okay, I just want to take this, let's export audio mix down. And then I could just say, let's take the revelation and we'll say, let's import it into an audio track. And I'm going to set the left and right locator here around the event. So we could offline export it as well. So let's do our export audio mix down. Let's create audio track. We'll export to audio. And now this is going to be just the effect rendered just like that. So that's a different approach. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. Okay, reading through questions. Thanks for all the great comments. And again, if you've learned something, make sure you hit the like button or subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. All right, so we see a question. Is Steinberg planning a similar workshop series for VST Live? So if you have VST Live questions, you could email them in to us and we'd be happy to answer them here. I just kind of handle the Cubase ones, and other people do other live streams, but I don't know of any that have been set up for VST Live. It's still a very new program, but if you have a VST Live question, we'd be happy to answer them. If you want to email it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have a question. Hi, will now Cubase 12 Pro with all my Steinberg instruments and plugins work without the e-licenser? So currently, many of the instruments are still transitioning over. So currently, the instruments that are working, most of the main applications have been migrated over, including, Cubase, Dorico, Wavelab, Nuendo, Spectral Layers. Instruments include Groove Agent and Backbone, and Fractured, I think, for Backbone is Soundset for Backbone. So those are working on a new licensing system. The other ones are still kind of transitioning over. Okay, so you see a question. Anybody in here know if we'll get another release around Christmas like we usually do, or is the scheduled new version now off because of the Cubase 12 late arrival? So, obviously we don't just release, Steinberg doesn't release products just because of it's a particular time of year. There's a whole engineering life cycle where, they have, coming up with all the features they have to work through engineering to do. So I wouldn't expect a new version. Cubase 12 came out in March. The earliest life cycle has been 12 months. So, but it could be later than that, just to kind of catch up with stuff. And there's a lot of different stuff with new processors, new operating systems that kind of throw a wrench into stuff. So all right, so you just see, hi Greg, Wave Studio Rack won't open on an instrument channel, keeps freezing Cubase, and I have to force shut down. Audio channels are fine, thanks. So I don't know Wave Studio Rack. I don't really have any Waves plugins anymore. But I thought that it was more for audio plugins versus instruments. But let me know if there's a particular reason you need to run an instrument in Studio Rack. But maybe it's a limitation of Wave Studio Rack. Maybe you could check with them. Okay, so you see, Greg, can I find the VST3 plugin somewhere in the hard disk? Windows PC 10. Would like to use them in a new free Wave Studio Rack. So let's go over to the... All right, so if maybe you click here on the information and then select the plugin, you could see the path right here in the VST plugin manager. So give that a try. All right, so we see a question. Do you know when MIDI remote integration will also fit the keys of native instruments? So, obviously many users have made them, but you could check with native instruments because I think the intention is that the actual actual controller manufacturers will be coming up with their implementations of the MIDI remote. Steinberg has sent all that information out to different companies. All right, we have Michael Pierce's soup recipe: carrot and coriander, cilantro, butter, onion, one big chopped potato, ground coriander, garlic, caraway seeds, loads of carrots, sweat plus stock, simmer, blend, seasoned chopped cilantro, and creme fraiche. Sounds good as always. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so I just see from Best Korean Jesus about it's any modification in the sidebar. So let me see if I get that going to recreate on my system. Okay, so we'll just come here. Or I'll just come back to revert this real quick. Okay, so I think you used a multi play. Okay, move parameters here. And it's going to edit the sample. So it doesn't seem like I can make mine crash the way yours did, but let me know if I'm still doing something differently than you. All right. Okay, so we see Cubase Pro 12, Windows 10. Today, every time we move the cursor back to the beginning of the track, it went into record mode. Couldn't find how to turn it off. Any ideas? Thanks. So it's probably that the maybe you had the left locator there, and if you hit the I key, that could turn on the punch in. So it's probably that the punch in is turned on. So every time, let's say if I have my left and right locator around here, so my left locator is at 1, and then I go back. So let's say if I have the punch in activated just by hitting the letter I go back to the beginning, it'll now just record. So it's probably, if you click right here in the punch in, or just hit the letter I, that will disable punch in for you. See, Sable Winters likes the comparison of learning Cubase to a new instrument. So, yeah, it's really, if you ask Hans Zimmer what instrument he plays, he'll say Cubase. Not piano, not guitar. He'll say Cubase. So, see, Got Yours just saying, cool thing about learning Cubase or any of these DAWs is having all the resources on YouTube. Man, I started back in the 80s. We used to have to go through the Cubase manual, and software was as big as a dictionary. So yeah, I don't miss those days. So it's great that you can find almost any answer to anything on YouTube. It's so amazing. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to make the view of the channels in the mixer follow a MIDI controller with faders when I scroll with the controller along the channels? Thank you very much in advance. Okay. So many, it could depend upon your actual controller. So if it's using like a Mackie control, so let's say we want to add, let's just add a bunch of audio tracks here. All right, so let's say we're in our mix console. All right, so I'm just going to make sure I'm reading this right. All right, so let's say if you want to make the view of the channels in the mixer follow a MIDI controller. So a lot of controllers do that. Like I don't have it connected now, but I have a Korg Nano control that when I select a particular channel, that channel gets selected in the mixer automatically. So many controllers do that. Mackie control, if you're using a Mackie controller like a Behringer X-Touch or something like that, then the Mackie control, you can't, it doesn't initiate, it doesn't follow the channel selection. So if I want it to come here and if I had a Mackie control, I would need to actually physically hit the bank buttons on the Mackie control to make it follow the selected channel in Cubase. So if you want it to follow the selected channel in Cubase, it can do that automatically, but the Mackie control, I guess the original protocol was designed so that you would do all the banking and channel selection on the Mackie control itself versus it following the software selection. So if it's just when you want the fader controls to do that, if it's a Mackie control, it's not in the protocol. You can maybe call Mackie and find out, but then many companies that aren't Mackie are still kind of backward engineering the protocol to make it compatible. So at this point, you could, but if you are using the new MIDI remote, it could automatically follow the selection. So if you let us know exactly which MIDI controller you're using. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to random pitch, position, volume, and length in the logical editor? So yeah, so let's go take a look. All right, so let's say. All right, so I'll just kind of put a random pitch in. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of chop up the pitch here, and we'll just randomize. So let's say I'm going to hold down my Alt key with the scissors tool. So now when we play this back, I'll just have the eighth notes here. Okay, so let's say I just want to randomize that. I'll just So we'll take our eighth note phrase, and I want to randomize. So let's come over to Midi logical editor. Let's get a setup. So we want to transform as our function. And then we want to say type is equal to notes. So we could just come over here and say, okay, I want to insert. So let's say value 1. I'll remove the second line. So I'm going to take our notes. Let's say value 1. Let's randomize. Set random values between C1 and C. Let's say C4 and say C4 and C3. Okay. And value 2, which will be velocity, we want to set random values between 70 and 110. Let's take our position and set to relative random values. Let's take our length and set to relative random values between, let's say, 0 and 80. So we just kind of take this, and if I did it right, and if I wanted this to always be within a scale, so I always want this to be in D major. So let's say between 80 and 300 for our length. And you could just kind of come up with different random elements, just kind of like that. So all sorts of good stuff that you could do. See, Nick is just saying, I'd just like to thank Steinberg for all those involved, helping me distracted with music and creativity for the last 30 years. Yes, there's a lot of people work really hard on this to make me look smart. So. So I see from Gerald Ely's, if I got his email. See, I did, and then my son took the charging cable for my iPad to school today. So, but I'll try to get an answer to you as soon as my son gets back from school with the cable. So sorry about that. But I'll try to reply to your email directly. Sorry about that, Gerald. All right, so I see questions. Some Cubase users say that version 12 works fine on Catalina. Is it true? So I don't think it's officially supported, but I know friends that are running it on Catalina still without any issues. So. Okay. All right, so we see question. Is there any way to bind a button to create drum map from instrument? I don't think that's a assignable function, but let's go ahead and take a look. me just try it. Yeah, I don't think that's a user keyboard shortcut addressable thing. Sorry about that. All right, so wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Just saying big hugs to the Steinberg Wonder Club. So glad you can make it, Gareth. Hope you're well. All right, just reading through comments. All right, so we see question, hey Greg, can you explain how to use locators for punching in and punching out? So by default, the left and right locators can be set for doing punch ins and punch outs. So like in my case, I think I have the preference where the range tool follows the punch in and punch out points. So if I wanted to just kind of set the punch in and punch out. So if I quickly wanted to come here, you know, if we set the left and right locators, we could do this manually as well. And now we would just hit I and O for in, punch in, which would be this icon here in the transport, and O for out. So we have punch out. So at this point, whatever tracks are recorded enabled as it plays, it'll now just kind of punch in right at the left locator and punch out at the right locator. And if we have, let's say, it turned off cycle, I'll come over here. Let's rewind a little bit. So now that's record enabled, punches in, punches out. Now, if we wanted to have the punch in and punch out give like a little bit before and a little bit after, we could also just kind of select a range, like if you don't have this particular preference set. So let's go to preferences, and I think it's under editing that the range, cycle follows range selection tool. So, but let's say I wanted to just set I have my left and right locators, and I wanted that as the cycle, but not necessarily the punch in and punch out point. So if we wanted that, we could go to your transport and go to punch points. And punch points could be independent. So I'm going to set the punch points to the range. So we could still do the cycle, the loop, and then punch in within the loop. And then if we wanted to, if I enable cycle this time, let's go back. So we could punch in, just and still have space before and space after for the punch. So if you needed to give like a pickup note, you could do that. So we could, by default, it'll tie into the punch in. The punch in and punch out will be tied to the left and right locators, but there's also punch points that you could utilize as well. So let me know if that's helpful or makes sense. All right, so question, as I can understand that now in Cubase 12, we can finally export stems. I mean, have violins, guitars, etc. if they all send, for example, to the same reverb or delay. So yeah, Cubase 12, we could do that, and we could do it in earlier versions. But what would happen, what's new in Cubase 12 is, let's say I had my violins and guitar going to the same reverb return. So they're both going to the same reverb. When I exported the violins with, by themselves, the guitar going into the reverb would also be fed and included with the effects. So with version 12, if we have the same effects being shared across multiple sources, and I export the violins as a group, and it's going to an effects channel send, and the guitars as a group are going to the same effects channel sends, it won't include the guitar in the violin section, and the guitar section won't include the violin reverb in the guitar group. So that's what's different about it. But you could always include the effects before, but now it's not going to include other sources that are also feeding the same effect send. All right. So we see just Gareth wishing me a good evening, hoping I'm well. So I'm doing great. We had a nice, relaxing holiday weekend here in the U.S. for Labor Day. So now we're kind of back to work. Okay, so we see why when recording a MIDI event is the MIDI clip so much bigger than a part I played, and can I change that in settings? Okay, so generally, let's say I have just a Rhodes part here, so I'm going to go ahead and, let's say, I'll just play this Rhodes part. I'll take out a cycle. Sorry about that. All right, so now I'll record. So I stop. Now there is a preference where we can say, I think it's maybe under record MIDI. That snap MIDI parts to bars. So if it's, but that just kind of punched in and out, and, wherever I punch in, punch out. But with that preference, now we could have an event that is actually will kind of make the recorded event start. So if I just punched in right here, it'll create the event to the nearest previous measure. So if that's what it is, go to preferences to record MIDI and try to snap MIDI parts to bars. Try setting that off and see if that helps. All right, so we see question, is there a way to highlight every other note in the MIDI editor? So yeah, we can do it with a logical editor. So I'll come over here. Here, I'll just put in just a quick part. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight every other note. Okay, so we have these. So let's go to the MIDI logical editor. And this is I think it's already a preset in there, but we'll get a setup. and we want to choose select. Type is equal to notes, and then I think if we come over here, we can say last event, every other event, event counter, and 2. So now when I come here, every other note will be selected. So we could just do it like that. So choose select, type is equal to note, last event, every other event, event counter, and then just type in 2. Then every second note, if you type in 3, every third note will be selected, like so on. All right, so we see Gareth is a new Gregality. Sorry, tongue-tied today. To rip off, it's been a long time. So Gareth, for those who don't know, I used to just play some little nonsensical stuff, and then he would make a song out of it. So. All right, so we see, is it possible to set the default MIDI input to my keyboard every time add a new MIDI or instrument channel? The default is all MIDI inputs, so that's the default. If so, there, I don't know of a way to change it to a default MIDI input port. And the thinking is that as we do that, that anything that's available, you know, if you have multiple controllers, that it could see that. If you wanted to hide other controllers, and I realize this may be a different thing, but if you didn't want other controllers to be included in all MIDI inputs, if we come over to Studio Setup and go to MIDI port setup, you could then choose to not have other keyboards in all MIDI inputs, so that it's always going to be just one particular controller. So, but sorry about that. It's all right, so we see, is it possible to extend only the right cycle marker to duplicated parts in a track via key command? Okay. Okay, so I guess it's maybe if we come here. All right, so let's see. See if we can do it in a project logical editor. I'll show you a different way as well. So I assume that maybe we want to duplicate this and have it be 3 measures or 2 measures, but to have this automatically duplicate over and still have this always start on a grid. All right, so let's see if we could do this. So I don't know a way just to have the right marker, but here's something that you might be able to do that could help. So if I select just the range here for one measure, so let's say I select 3 measures of data, but but I only have like 2 3/4 measures of information. So now if I just duplicate, that would still line it up. So you could select kind of the actual range here, and then at that point duplicate. So if we duplicate this event here, so if this doesn't quite last, let me just turn on snap here. Okay, so if we duplicate this event, like I would want this phrase to maybe start at measure at this bar right here. So, but if we duplicate, it gets off slightly. But with the range tool, I have the range selected. Now I could just duplicate the selected range, and then all the events will line up on a grid. So let me know if that works for you. See Gerald Ely just saying punch points separated from the locators, another learning point. So, all right. So a question. So with the punch in and punch out, does the record has to be enabled before you do that or not? So it's not going to punch in and punch out on a particular track until that track is record enabled. Otherwise, it would just punch, once you have the punch in and punch out active, do you want it to record on all tracks or no tracks? But I think it makes sense to have it record directly on the track that is record enabled. So. So we see from Spencer B, just a nice comment. Hello all. Greg, as always, thanks for your help here. Who knew when you buy Cubase, you would get such accessible support? Best DAW ever. So, why would you assume that you wouldn't? So, all right, but thanks for the kind words. All right, we see Best Green Jesus just saying drum map editor for the win. All right, so we see Stargazers just bought update to Cubase 12, haven't installed it yet. So welcome to the Cubase 12. And if you have any questions, please just feel free to ask at any time during the live streams. All right, so he sees, just see from Alex Mendoza, I have the Mark II Complete Control S49 Mark II, trying to get it work with Cubase Pro 12, just like Dom's video, not getting any transport, mixer functions loading. So, if, once you have kind of like your MIDI remote set up here, sorry, I just accidentally closed it. Bear with me. Once you have, make sure that you don't have the MIDI remote configured in, that you don't have it configured in like a generic remote as well as a MIDI remote script. So I'll just show you here quickly. So if you already have, or if you downloaded kind of a remote configuration, then those functions may be kind of already allocated and kind of spoken for. So if you wanted to now, make sure that it's not set up like as a Mackie control or a generic remote where these MIDI ports are kind of being already used. But then you should be able to kind of add it in, and also, make sure that you, reach out to Native Instruments. Make sure to tell them that you want Cubase MIDI remote support. All right, so we see from Michael Stram, close. Say a 2-bar MIDI loop, duplicate it 4 times, and have the cycle loop extend for the full range of the MIDI loop. Okay. Okay, so let's say I have this 2-bar loop, and I have the cycle set around the first. All right, so I'm going to just duplicate that a couple times. So if I shift double click and then hit the letter P, you can then, that will automatically set the cycle marker around the entire events that you've copied. So if you have like the loop markers, so if you have like this time selected, where you can say, and even if you want to take like those events, just shift and, you know, and if we have another one that's separate from this, sorry, let me just copy this one out here. So since these are connected, these are kind of touching each other, I could shift, double click on, that will select all the events, but any time that you have the events selected, you could just hit the letter P around the selected events. So even if we just hold down shift and left arrow, so say I duplicated these events, so duplicate, all right, and then I'm just holding down shift plus left and right arrow and then hit the letter P, and then that will automatically move the left and right locators directly around the selected events. So let me know if that's helpful. So hit the P key, and that will, whatever is selected, that will put the left and right locators around that. All right, so we see attracted to the metal like magnetos joining us, and you don't have to worry about apologizing for being late. We're just glad you could join us. But only if you are late, you just have to hit the like button immediately. So. All right. So I see that Jazz Dude's kind enough to share the script form link to where scripts are. All right, so I just see maybe with that, so I assume I could change the key command group. So yeah, you could change, you know, the key commands for just about every aspect. So I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more that kind of sneak in. If not, we could wrap up a little early. I thank everyone for all their great questions, and we'll be doing this again on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. All right, see if more questions kind of pop in. If not, we could wrap up a little early. All right, and usually there's about a 30-second delay to when I talk to when it goes out to the stream. All right, so just see a quick comment from Jazz Dude says, if you want to try any MIDI device, keep in mind you need to sometimes tell which the MIDI in and out port is being used. Yeah, so that's a great point, Jazz Dude. So when creating a new MIDI device, so let me just jump back here. It's sometimes easy. So let's say I just have this. Make sure that you have multiple input and output ports for the same device. So make sure that you have the correct ports defined when creating the MIDI remote script. So we have a question. Can you assign multiple commands to a shortcut? You can, but generally it's probably going to be more problematic than it's worth. So you can assign multiple commands, but let's say every time you hit that keyboard shortcut, it's going to do all three of those commands, not just a command that you're thinking of at the time. So if you assign 4 different commands to the same keyboard shortcut, it will execute all 4 of those functions at the same time. So make sure, so that's why it's probably not a good idea to do it. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer finally made it. He's pushing the like. He's like number 141. That's a great number of likes. Thank you to everyone. Okay. Okay, so I just see from just a quick comment from Jordan G. Let me see. I just see like piano or guitar instrument. Let me just see if it's a follow up to a question. Maybe I missed it in context. But maybe Jordan G. Okay, so Jordan G says, what kind of shocked me, Selena Gomez does use Cubase. Oh, that's interesting. All right. Okay, we'll see if there's more. All right, I'll give it another like 20 seconds. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. See Jazz Dude just saying, who is Selena Gomez? I think she's in Only Murders in the Buildings with Steve Martin on Hulu. I've seen her on. So, in the first season, they went to Bayport, which is where my wife grew up, in their adventures to Long Island. So, all right, we'll see if there's any more. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Save me a little time on working on index. And Jordan G, if you have a link of Selena Gomez with Cubase, you could just feel free to email it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so I guess with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. So everyone take care. Thanks for all the great questions, and we'll see everyone on Friday. Goodbye.